Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's sessions. I'm going to share some secrets with you on the HBS, Wharton, and GSB interview. I'm really excited to be here today with GMAT Club. So we want to go ahead and jump in. I'm going to introduce myself first. My name is Liza Wheel. I am the founder of Gatehouse Admissions. We are a boutique MBA consulting firm. I have been coaching people in the application process for over 2 decades and have interviewed hundreds of clients, done mock interviews for hundreds of clients through the years. So I'm really excited to be here today and share some things that we internally at Gatehouse take for granted. We kind of know these things. And then when we talk to people who are applying, we're always like, oh, wait, you don't know this? And so I'm really excited to share some of sort of this insider knowledge that we've built up through the years about interviewing. Just a quick snapshot on what the agenda is going to be. First, I just want to orient everyone around the timeline. It is indeed interview season for round one. It's right upon us. So just so everybody knows what to expect for these 3 schools. And then we're going to dig in to the schools themselves. So we're going to talk about Harvard, Stanford, and Wharton. What makes each of their interviews a little different from one another. Some of the kind of typical gotcha areas, that's really sort of our this is like the insider knowledge that we've developed over years, and then give you some strategies for each of the schools to prep. And then we'll wrap with some just kind of general techniques. Even though each of these schools is different for the interviews, there's a lot of common prep and common strategies you can use for any of these schools and any of the schools that you are fortunate enough to be interviewing with. And then we'll wrap with, I'll point you in the direction of some additional resources and take questions at the time. If you have questions as we go along, feel free to chime in the comment box. I may hold off until the end, depending on what the question is, or I will address it right there and then. So feel free. I love questions. I give gold stars, at least virtual ones in my mind. So definitely encourage you guys to ask any questions. And right now, this is timely for those of you who just hit submit on your round 1 application. But really, whenever you end up applying or are applying, if you look at this in round 2, or if you end up applying next year, you can always come back to this, because the good thing about Harvard, Stanford, and Wharton is nothing has really changed in their interview format for several years at least, so that the intel that we provide today is going to be relevant for whenever you chime in. All right, but still, because we are at the end of round 1 with the deadlines just hitting, I do want to orient ourselves around October 2024 and what to expect. So really, we at Gatehouse think of the month of October as mock interview season. And to get a little bit more specific about what you can expect to see, this is cutting edge or breaking news. I would say that Harvard just announced, as of yesterday, I think around noon Eastern, we were actually all in a team meeting at Gatehouse, and one of the consultants on the team was like, Harvard just announced that they're going to send out interview invitations on Monday, September 30th at 12 p.m. Eastern. And that is when all round 1 applicants will hear the news. So it's a big day for those of you who did apply or are planning to apply. You'll always want to keep an eye out on the blog direct from the director for these kinds of this kind of intel, so that you're ready for when the actual news comes out. So with that, there are a few things to keep in mind. And this is HBS. This is already like right off the bat, the first bullet here is a little depressing. Only about 20% of applicants are actually invited to interview. And if you think about it, last year, I think HBS reported of having applications somewhere in the 9,000 level. And roughly-ish, half of that comes in round 1, half of that comes in round 2, thereabouts. We actually don't have that intel from the schools, but that roughly means about 1,000 applicants are going to be interviewed. That's a pretty big number, except when you think about all the people who are not being interviewed. So, it's important to know that at this point on September 30th, you'll get one of 3 messages. You'll be one of the lucky 1,000 to be interviewed. you'll be one of the, somewhere around 3,000-ish, 3,000, 4,000-ish, that will be let go from the process. That means you are no longer being considered, or you might be put into what I call like an HBS special. It's the deferred or further consideration bucket. And so this one might be, they don't provide numbers, but our estimate is somewhere around 100, 200 of applicants in that round one application pool who are actually, the decision on them is delayed until round two. So if you are lucky enough, if you're one of the 1,000 or so to be invited for interview, congratulations. If you are not, I think my biggest headline there is like Monday, September 30th is going to be a rough day for lots of people, for hundreds of people, for thousands of people, like really. So you're not alone. You're an excellent company, and it can be brutal. So I feel for you, and am rooting for each and every one of you who either applied or apply in the future. The other things to know is you need to be ready. Whenever HBS announces its interviews, you need to be ready the next day, bright and early, no matter what time zone you are in. 9 a.m. Eastern is when the scheduler opens. So this is super important. You need to get in and schedule your appointment before all the key dates are blocked. So really make sure you schedule your alarm or whatever you need to do so that you can find a date that works for your schedule. Interviews happen. So on September 30th is when you'll hear, but the actual interviews happen anywhere from sort of mid-October through the first or sometimes even the second week of November. We'll see. So, you can certainly choose for dates that are further along. Here's a little secret. It does not matter when you schedule your interview for, whether you schedule it immediately in the near future, or if you schedule it on the very last day that is available. That doesn't matter. They do not evaluate the class until they have interviewed everybody. So it really doesn't matter when you do it, nor does it really matter when in the day. If you are someone who is just better in the afternoon, by the way, this is not me. I'm a morning person. I would 100% schedule my interview for the morning. But if you are someone who's better at the end of the day, fine. Remember that your interviewers are professional, so don't worry too much. Make what works for you. The interview is going to be 30 minutes sharp. You are going to be interviewed by someone on the admissions team who has been trained frequently for years, like has been doing interviews for years and years. So you're going to be with a professional, and you can do it either virtually or in person on campus. And in the past, HBS has also provided a few satellite offices or satellite experiences for people to do it in person, but not on campus. Again, you decide what you want, what makes sense for you. I would say if you are close to campus or close to one of these sort of hubs, interview hubs, take advantage of doing it in person. For no other reason in that, besides it might just be easier for you to build a rapport with the interviewer. And that's really essential. I'll mention that, I think, a few times today. If I don't, just remember I mentioned it now. You want to, it's just when you're in person, you can almost feel the energy a little bit better than doing it virtually. So that's really the timeline to keep in mind with HBS, excuse me. All right, so let's take a look at some of the other schools. Let's take a look at Wharton. Wharton is also nice in that they tell you already when you can expect to hear from them. They told applicants in round one, right when they hit submit on their application, that they would hear about interviews at the end of October. So roughly about 6 or 7 weeks after the submission date. So again, if you are looking at this presentation and you applied in round 2, that's fine. All the stats besides the dates are going to be still relevant and important to you. But in 2024, round 1, they've announced that they're going to release the interview decisions on Thursday, October 24th at 5 p.m. And at that point, you're either going to be invited to interview or you are not, at which point you are let go. Wharton does not have a further consideration bucket that's kind of in between that HBS does. Side note, HBS is one of the very few. The only other is Sloan at this point that does something like that. But anyway, So that's the date you need to put on your schedule, the 24th for Wharton. And then let's see the details. So Wharton does not share, is not very open about what percentage of its applicants it interviews. But, just kind of based on what we have seen at Gatehouse, we estimate around 30% of applicants are interviewed roughly. And so somewhere, this number is probably high, 2,000 might be like close to like 1,500, 2,000 people are interviewed, and some portion of them will later be accepted. I'm going to come up with, I'll remember some random notes as we go along. At all of these schools, an interview is an essential step of the process. So if you're not interviewed, if you're not invited to interview, that also means you are not being accepted. What's really interesting about Wharton is they do something very different. They have something that's called the team-based discussion. This is unique to Wharton. They launched it, I think, about almost 10 years ago now. And it's a really kind of fun experience, but one that applicants and candidates really get stressed out about because it is so unknown and different. So I'm going to give you some tips on how to prepare for the team-based discussion, but know that you are going to be working alongside other applicants to Wharton. And also know that after the team-based discussion, you will have a short one-on-one with a second year. And this is great just because sometimes people are like stressed out, like the whole thing was this team-based discussion and did Wharton really get to know me? And so this little one-on-one will give you a chance to be a little bit more in control of communicating anything that you want to or need to. These are virtual. I think this was before COVID. What Wharton did was have everybody come to campus and did these team-based discussions in person. They have not gone back. And then once COVID happened, then they went virtual. They've not gone back to in-person. I suspect that it's actually better. It may not feel better for participants. I suspect some participants want to do it in person, but it provides more access to everybody and sort of equalizes the playing field. Or levels the playing field so that if you are international or if it's a lot of money to visit these schools and buy the plane ticket, stay in a hotel. I mean, that could be like thousands of dollars, depending on where you're flying from, where you're staying, time of year. And so the fact that they're all virtual, that means that everybody can, any person that's interviewing has kind of the same shots in terms of the virtual nature. So just know it's going to be a virtual. Also assume about 2 hours of your time. The whole team-based discussion isn't 2 hours. You're going to have some downtime in there, but it's there's a little bit of a scheduling nightmare-ish where the observers in your team-based discussion will have that one-on-one with you, but they'll be managing other one-on-ones. So you might be killing some time waiting for your one-on-one, but you'll want to kind of assume 2 hours of your time. Of that, I guess probably an hour, close to an hour of you'll be busy for close to an hour of it. The rest of the time you'll have a little downtime. All right, that's it for Wharton and what to expect timing-wise. Now let's jump into GSB. GSB does not get a smiley face because GSB, we say it like comes out in drips and drabs. GSB is notorious in my mind for just kind of keeping you guessing, keeping you on your toes. They've actually already started sending out interview invitations. They started in the past 2 weeks, and they will continue sending out invitations little by little, day by day, until the middle of November. If you have not heard anything from Stanford by Thanksgiving, you're not going to hear anything positive from them. And here's something that's interesting. They last year, they sort of announced that or 2 years ago, they announced that they were going to have this sort of further consideration bucket. It doesn't appear that they used it at all, and it doesn't look like they're using it this year. So it really is similar to Wharton in that you are going to either be invited for an interview or you're let go. But the difference here is that you just don't know anything until you know something. Really, like one day you might get invited or you don't. Next day you could get invited or you won't. So it is a really long haul waiting game. You want to stay optimistic. and stay positive, because until they tell you you're not invited, there's no reason to think you won't be. And I think they say in mid-November. So I just say, if you haven't heard anything positive by Thanksgiving, you're not going to hear something positive. Okay, so remember, Stanford is very small, has a very small class, around 400, depending on the year. Compared that to HBS, which is roughly twice the size. Wharton's class is a lot bigger as well. It's a small program, and the numbers of how many people that they interview is smaller, as well as how many people they ultimately accept. So GSB, they say they interview roughly 2 to 3 people for each spot. So give or take, it's around 15% of applicants. Might be a little bit higher, a little bit lower in any given year. But so it's going to be roughly around 500 people are going to be interviewed in round 1, if I possibly totally did my math right, or I might not. Yeah, that gets you to about the right number as I look at it. Maybe it is actually a little bit higher, so maybe like 600, but and then the other folks, they're going to be let go from the process. Again, what's really hard about GSB, every year we get into a little bit of an internal discussion on which is better. Everybody being cut or invited right off the bat on that September 30th, or this kind of like waiting game. It depends where you are, if you want a quick answer, or if you're okay with a long wait. I think they're both kind of brutal, but I definitely think that Stanford's process is pretty brutal, because you just kind of have to keep tapping into, fingers crossed, we wait and see. Once you are invited to interview, you'll be matched typically with an alumni, sometimes with a member of the admissions team, and you need to have your interview in pretty quick order. So meaning typically they want you to finish your interview within 7 to 10 business days. So 1 to 2 weeks, or 5 to 10 business days, 1 to 2 weeks. So that's also why it's really good that you're watching this presentation, because let's say you get invited from GSB tomorrow, you're not going to have a lot of time to prep. Consider this the first step of your prep. Let's see. I'm just seeing one question come through. What if I failed to get an admissions previously? Can I expect the call this time, or do they have any window? So chatbot, that's a good question. If you weren't accepted the last time, or you weren't invited to interview last time, you would still just kind of be like a normal applicant. Yes, you were a reapplicant. They may have asked for additional information, but all this sort of timing wise thing, it all pertains to you. You would still be expected to interview. Even if you interviewed the first time around, you would be expected to interview the second time around as well. So all these kind of dates and this flow still pertain to you as well. Last thing on GSB, it can happen either virtual, or this year they have brought back in person. I think last year, 2023, the 2023-2024 application season, some people wanted to do them in person, but I think, Stanford just kind of was like, let's just do everybody virtual. But this year they're making it more whatever people want and feel comfortable with, which is great. But they also what's important to know with GSB, you don't have to travel for GSB. They will match you with an alum that is somewhere located nearby, or you can do it virtually. So again, similar to Wharton, you'll have options, but you definitely do not have to go to campus. In fact, if you go to campus, your interview is not going to be there, just like Wharton. Okay. What about consortium applicants? It's another question. Will they update the portal with updates in the consortium? So if you are applying through consortium, you will hear through consortium. So that's a great point. For these schools, Stanford is the one that's in the consortium mix. You will not hear about interviews in the general typical flow. And I actually don't know if you'll hear first from consortium or Stanford, because I know the consortium Stanford app is due October 15th, but presumably you'll probably still hear by the tail end of the application, the interview window. But obviously you're not going to hear it yet, because your consortium application hasn't been done yet. For the other schools, it depends a little bit on each of the schools that's in the consortium. But that's a good question. All right. Now let's dive into the good stuff. Again, if you were applying to any of these schools, I would encourage you to watch the whole thing because some of this stuff is relevant. And if you, and at the end, we'll talk about generic kind of like prep that you should be doing for all of them. But I do want to spend some time speaking about each individual interview because these three schools, I give them credit. So many of our clients at Gatehouse are targeting one of these three schools or all of these three schools, and their apps are each so different, and so are their interviews. Makes it kind of fun, and it gives probably each of you a chance to shine in different ways. All right, so the HBS interview, the known, the secrets, and how to prep. All right, so we're going to talk about the HBS interview, the known and what makes it unique. Big Mike, I'm going to talk a little bit about more generic prep at the end, so stay tuned. It's a great question. But again, a lot of these headlines will be applicable for all of their schools. I'll clarify from time to time when I can. But HBS. HBS is a super unique interview in the world of business school admissions because for the vast majority of the other schools go in with just a resume. The person hasn't read your application. They know nothing about you except their resume. There are some exceptions, Stern, Sloan, London Business School, NCAD. I think those have, for the most part, may have looked at your application, but no one is like HBS. HBS prepares meticulously for their interview with you. And I say with you because what they do is spend a ton of time looking at your application. They're going to research where you work. They're going to really dive into all of your online application responses, your resume. They're going to want to have a sense, they're going to do their best to get a sense of who you are and what exactly you have done before they even go into the room with you. This makes it a very unique and customized challenge because what you discuss depends fully on your HBS interviewer. It's not even depends on HBS. Each interviewer has their own style. We all have our own things that we are interested in and ways that we want to go about an interview. And they might, if you gave the same app to 3 different HBS interviewers, each of them might be interested in talking to you in 3 different things. So you really just don't know. What you do know is it's going to be about you and your application. In the interview itself, you will have your interviewer, and sometimes you will also have an observer. The observer is, just like it sounds, the person is observing the interview. Your dialogue is most likely going to be with the interviewer. It is neither a plus or a minus if there is an observer there. It is not a plus or a minus if there's not an observer there. Sometimes it's for training. Sometimes somebody just wants a second set of eyes. Don't worry about it. There's nothing to read into. The other thing, that is something that kind of makes HBS unique as well. The other thing that makes HBS unique is its post-interview reflection, or what we call the PIR. This is basically a postscript, if you will, a PS, just a follow-up note that you are going to be required to submit to HBS within 24 hours of having completed your real interview. And it really is. It just gives you a time. If you think about it, what I said in the second bullet is what you discuss, it depends on what your interviewer asks. And they introduced the post-interview reflection probably, about 8 years ago, I think, give or take. And I love it because it just gives you a chance to have the final word. It's not a big deal. It's not table stakes. It's not going to likely change the outcome, but it just gives you a chance to reflect on the interview and make sure if there's something you didn't have a chance to communicate, you now have the chance to communicate. But it is a unique piece and you need to be ready and be prepared for it. And the HBS application or interview, it's really just to assess, okay, they've done their research on you based on your application. Are you who they think you are? So just to kind of match up the person they met on paper with the person they're meeting in person. And they want to understand what you will add, what you will bring to campus, and who you'll be in the classroom. Are you going to be someone that others in the class can learn from? That's a big piece of it. If you think about it with HBS, the case method, so much of the learning that happens will be learning from your peers. And that's one of the things the schools are going to be assessing, the HBS will be assessing in the interview. So this is super unique. No one else scours your application like HBS does. Just so you know, on HBS, even when we do our HBS mocks, we spend a good, if it's a client we know, we spend at least 45 minutes developing our question list. If it's a client we don't know, so it's someone that's new to us just for a mock interview, we might spend up to an hour and a half preparing for our interview with them. It's a big deal. Okay, so let's talk about the secrets, the gotchas, common gotchas. So I just said how there's, every interview is really customized to you, and it is. They might ask you how you landed on your undergrad school institution to go to school, what mark you made at school. They might ask you why your recommenders said something that they said. They might ask you why you called out a certain challenge in your application as being the most significant challenge and to tell them more about it. It's all customized to you. However, there are some questions that we hear a lot. And so I want to pass these on to you because these are absolutely questions that you should prep to have in your back pocket. Should you be asked? Should you be asked about any of them? And they are as follows. Where do you get your news? HBS expects that its applicants, its candidates, its students are well informed, are eager to know what's going on in the world. They're not trying to judge where you get your news. They want to know, are you kind of interested in what's going on in the world? So be prepared to answer that. If you don't know where you get your news, figure it out. Another question they might ask is, who is a leader you admire? Think about HBS. It is all about, its whole goal is to create excellent leaders. And again, they want to see that you are someone who wants to learn from others, and you already have spotted leaders out there that you could learn from. So that's another one. Have an answer for it. What is a company or an issue you're following? These are kind of all similar, right? But it's surprising how many, when I give one of these questions in a mock HBS interview, people are like, I've never thought about that. What's a company or issue you're following? The school wants to know that you are interested in the world around you. If you can't answer this question, put it on your list to figure out an answer to it. Because again, they want to see, are you curious? Are you driven? Are you learning about things? It doesn't really matter what the answer is, but you need to be able to articulate it to someone and explain like what's an issue you're following. The other question you should absolutely be prepared for, is there anything else you'd like us to know? This can be a really daunting question to get at the end of an HBS interview. Remember, they're 30 minutes, they're pretty fast, you're not in control, but you still will get this question regularly at the end, and you need to have an answer. 2 quick strategies on it. 1, think about stories or things that you haven't told them that you want to, that are essential to understanding who you are. And then 2, just be ready if you have told them everything, end with some sort of pitch about why you're a strong candidate. There's also this common misconception that I just want to get you guys not to to realize the truth about. They are not out to test you. They're not going to be grilling you, I don't know, to do some random case on like how many manholes are how many manholes are there in New York City, or how many runways are there at an airport. They're just not going to be asking you that kind of thing. However, that doesn't mean you're going into the interview with a friend either. One way to think about this is that you're talking to somebody who is relatively senior at your company, but still someone who is approachable. It's important just to be like, it's someone you're speaking to who you don't want to be you want to be real, you want to be you, but you don't want to be completely informal. And you want to be thoughtful about you're communicating with somebody who has tremendous perspective and who is a little bit more senior to you. So just have that element of gravitas, but still being true. in the interview. So that's something I think people often get wrong about it. They either think, oh my God, the person's out to test me and catch me, or they think they can just kind of go in as if it's a friend and be really casual. And I wouldn't recommend that either. The PIR, and I saw the PIR. So PIR stands for the post-interview reflection. And it's just a written document, a brief written essay. I think the limit is around 450 words. And it's asking you, the exact prompt will be announced when, I think, next week when HBS announces its interviews. But in the past, it's been like, what was your highlight from the interview? And looking back now, is there anything that you didn't share with us that you'd like to? And it's, one pager follow up to an interview. That's all the PIR is. And again, the PIR is very low stakes. It just really, I think it was great of HBS to introduce it. It gives you a chance to have that final word. It's not going to change the outcome. So really, that's why they're like, you only have 24 hours to complete it. They're kind of like, don't spend a lot of time on it. Although I know from our clients, they end up spending a lot of time on it, which they shouldn't. But it also can be helpful for you, because one of the things that HBS does not ask in its interview is, do you have any questions for us? You'll be asked that in your Wharton interview. You'll be asked that in your GSB interview. You'll be asked that in your Booth, your Columbia, in your Sloan interview. You will not be asked it in your HBS interview. And so very often you're also not asked why HBS. Sometimes you are. But, often with these things, like, you will have a chance in these other interviews, you'll be able to explain why you like the school, whether it's through your questions of them or when you're describing why school X. You don't have those opportunities at HBS. So it's nice to be able to be in control of telling them why you're interested in the school. And that can be often a reason to use a PIR. Okay. And if you want to clarify anything, or if you're like, oh, I don't know how it went. Oh, and by the way, if you walk out of this is another secret. If you walk out of your HBS interview saying, I nailed it, you probably didn't. And if you walk out of that interview being like, I am not sure how you went, you probably did pretty well. I found in my very unscientific analysis that people that come out feeling like, nailed it, did super well, didn't stumble at all, they don't actually convert to an acceptance. And the ones that are iffy on their performance, or even the ones that are like, I don't know, that went well, I didn't think that went well, they usually do better. I don't know if it's is simply the humility to recognize that there's always things we could have done better in these things. And maybe for those people who are like, nailed it, there's like too much ego and arrogance there that came out in the interview itself. So anyway, that's just a side note, little tidbit from me based on what I've seen. So how to prepare, right? I'm saying, like, they could ask whatever they want. How do you actually prepare for the HBS interview, or do you at all? You absolutely do prepare, and you start by preparing the same way that they prepare, right? You spend a lot of time looking at your application. You spend time looking at your resume, your essays, your short answer. If you have seen your letters of recommendation, you also will want to see those letters of recommendation before going on, just so you know what was covered in them. What's important is to think of the additional context, especially, like, a great example is on your resume. You have like a bullet. Maybe you're in consulting and you did a big cost saving project for a large manufacturer. And thanks to your hard work, you helped implement an AI tool that saved them 20% of their expenses. Nice, good, cool, nice, bite-sized, powerful bullet on your resume. As part of your preparation, you want to know the backstory. You want to know the details. You want to know exactly what you did. You want to know more precisely what the challenges were associated with achieving that bullet and what the outcomes, how you achieved them and what the outcomes were. So you want to know kind of like all the surrounding context, and you want that material to be quick in your head so that if you're asked a question on a specific bullet, you're ready. Doesn't mean you know what you're going to ask them, but you know all the background information. So regardless of what they ask, well, what made that cost-saving exercise so valuable that to you personally? Why was it valuable to your professional development? Oh, if you haven't spent the time looking at your resume, you will stumble and you'll be like, oh my God, I do not even remember. And you'll be like, you'll be totally caught off guard. But if you remember and go through the process of reviewing your applications like they do ahead of time, you'll be so much more ahead. Get fresh eyes on your app. So the first step is for you to prepare, remind yourself of everything you've done. The second piece is actually to get other people to look at your application, especially people who know what they're doing, and ask them what questions would they have, right? Like just ask whether it is a colleague of yours that you trust, a mentor that you trust. Obviously, reach out to us at Gatehouse. Get fresh eyes on your entire application and ask them, what questions would you have for me based on this? It can just be a good thing to see, like, you know your app so well. In fact, that's something we do even internally at Gatehouse with our own clients who are applying to HBS. When they are invited to interview, the first thing we do is start swapping apps internally so that, if it's my client who's interviewing at HBS, I have somebody else's eyes on their app to help me develop the questions so that I can see them almost with fresh eyes. So keep that in mind. Get fresh eyes on your app so you know the things that maybe you take it for granted, but that an outsider with fresh eyes would have questions about. This next bullet is the important part is like, know your stories and then forget them. And so this is all like you don't know what the questions are and you don't want to memorize things. You just want to know the headlines. And then once you've gotten all the details in your mind, you refresh your memory, then you just forget them. Don't try to practice every iteration of a question. You'll be practicing for 16 years because there are that many iterations of questions that they could ask you. But, it's always about knowing the context and have the details top of mind so you can serve them up elegantly with confidence, without issue, regardless of what question they ask. Then it's just almost like knowing your math tables, right? I know that 2 times 4 is 8. So that comes out really quickly. Whatever the question is, those details, that's how kind of quickly you want those details so that you can be in the moment thinking about the bigger picture items and how you're conveying your points and being strategic with your answers to reinforce whatever you want to reinforce throughout that interview. Practice out loud. This is essential. I promise you'll be really good. Like when you're practicing by yourself and then you're like, I got it. And then the first time you actually try it out loud, you'll be like, oh my God, what just came out of my mouth? That was not how it sounded in my head. Have any of you ever said that? Not how it sounded in my head when I was doing it, doing it on my own. So the point here is practice out loud. Speak out loud. One of my peers, Brooke, she was actually she was an interviewer for HBS for years. She's like, record yourself, practice, listen for things like was able to. That's a pet peeve comment of mine. Get rid of it. Just make sure you're practicing out loud. Do your research on HBS. Even though they won't ask you, do you have any questions for us? They might ask you, why HBS? You never know. Even though everything's customized, you still need to know the foundational or the kind of baseline interview questions for HBS. Do your research and practice these gotchas. I gave you these gotchas. These gotchas are gotchas that our interviewers regularly use, that we regularly hear from clients who are interviewing from HBS. Don't go into an HBS interview without having prepped these. I can't guarantee you're going to get them, but if you get them, I want you to be prepared, right? Okay, that is a lot for HBS. I want to move into the next one, which is Wharton. The Wharton interview, the known, the secrets, and how to prep. All right, so the Wharton interview, and I see some questions popping up. I'm going to take them a little bit later. You guys are asking good questions, which I love. Some of these I don't know the answer for, and so I want to go Google immediately. But keep the questions coming, so I love them. All right, so Wharton, they have this thing called the team-based discussion. HBS has the PIR, Wharton has the TBD, the team-based discussion. It's pretty awesome. They started doing this about 10 years ago. I have moderated I don't know, up over 100 of them. They're super fun, but they can be super intimidating. So I want to get rid of the intimidation right off the bat. Here's what the TBD is. I'm going to refer to it as the TBD. That's what it means, team-based discussion. It's basically about six applicants to Wharton. It can range, maybe 4, maybe 7, all depends. Sometimes it can even be 3. You're going to be brought into a Zoom room, and you're going to have 2 observers, both of whom are Wharton second-year students. And you are going to be given a challenge. You will get the challenge ahead of time. You will actually get the challenge when you are invited to interview. And if you remember, like I do, because of course I remember this stuff, that would be on October 24th. You will be notified. And when you are notified, if you are going to be interviewed, you will also be told what the challenge prompt is. In years past, one year it was like design a new global modular, I forget what the C is for, whatever, component maybe, but it was basically a global trip, a GMC. That's what the GMC referred to, but now I'm forgetting what the C refers to. But it's basically like design an international trip. And each person in your group will have 1 minute to present your pitch, your idea, your individual idea of what kind of global trip you want to design. Each person will go around the room, around the Zoom room, and present their idea. And then as a group, you have to decide on what idea you want to coalesce around, how you want to further define it. And then you will also be required to present your idea that you've all agreed on to the 2 observers. You have about 30 or 35 minutes to work together as a group. And when the observers are just watching you. It can sound super intimidating, but it's actually, from having watched so many, it's super, super fun because no one comes up with the same idea twice. All the group dynamics are always different. But really, this is, I think Wharton did this in part because I think Wharton gets a little bit of a bad rap out there for being pretty cutthroat and competitive. So that this whole idea is like you're working as a team. And so their whole interview is a team-based discussion. It's designed to see you in action. Keep in mind, you will have a one-on-one right afterwards. It's super short. It's brief. It's about 10 minutes long. It's just a great opportunity for you to have that one-on-one connection with the school, with your interviewer. And basically, I'll tell you a little bit about it. So here are the secrets. So I told you, you have to coalesce around one pitch in this. Whoever pitch wins does not matter. So your goal is not for everybody to choose your pitch. That's just not it. Your goal is to work as a team to come up with a solution. It could be your pitch that wins. That's cool. And it could be another pitch that wins. That's cool too. Even if somebody else's pitch wins, you're still in the game. Okay, so this is a big misconception about it. I have to get my pitch to win. No, what you have to do is, as a team, collectively win. The other thing that makes these really tough, it's critical to balance your effort. You do need to make an appearance. They need to hear you. They need to know that you're in the room and you are advancing the project or the effort. But at the same time, you don't want to dominate. You don't want to be such a hog that you're grabbing the mic. You're not you're kind of showing off. You're peacocking. Ugh, yuck. That's just not going to go over well to the observers. So there's this delicate balance. You have to get a word in, but not too many words on. So that's something to keep in mind. And just the big thing to remember here is that all of you in your group can be accepted. Every single one of you. Think of yourself as part of your business school team. Not as individual trying to duke it out, okay? The other kind of secret thing about Wharton's thing is in that follow-up, you'll likely get questions. Actually, this is in the next column. You'll get kind of standard questions, but you might also get questions like, how did that go for you? What was your role on the team-based discussion? So be ready to reflect in the moment on your performance. That can be a gotcha unless you're prepared for it. Now you're prepared for it. Okay, and then how do you prepare overall for the Wharton TBD? Well, number one, they give you the challenge when you're invited to interview. So prepare that pitch. Take it seriously, have fun with it, and think of it as that, as a pitch. Often, like if it were the global modular component, GMC, someone might be like, I want to plan a trip to Paris, and we will meet some exciting companies over there, and it'll last 6 weeks. Okay, that's boring, right? Like bring your group into it, pitch them on it. Why Paris? Why is that a space? Why is that a city that you're interested in? Or what do you see as the potential learning opportunities? Engage, market your idea in your pitch, okay? Do a simulation. This is one of those things I actually believe mock interviews are valuable for all schools. I definitely suggest doing a Wharton simulation because it's honestly, I feel like there's such a huge difference before going into your first Wharton TBD, whether it's a mock or a real one, and afterwards, it's just like, you're like, oh, now I get it. Do a mock, 100%. Do a simulation. Be ready to reflect, as I just said. So make sure you are ready to, even when you have done your TBD, if you've done a simulation, be ready to reflect on how it went. Do your research on Wharton and know your story and have questions for them. This is, again, like total gotcha that I'm like, no, should not be a gotcha. Have questions for your interviewer about Wharton, and do your research on Wharton. Know your story. Walk me through your resume. Why Wharton and why business school? Common sense. Don't forget it just because Wharton has a TBD. And that's like stuff you should do for absolutely every other school out there, with the exception to a certain degree of HBS, okay? Like any school you're applying to. Okay, let's jump into GSB. As you can see, there's so much on these interviews. I could be talking for like another hour and a half. I appreciate those of you who are sticking around for this, but like there's just so much. So, but I want to give some love now to Stanford because, again, it's another unique interview. So what makes Stanford unique is that it's almost all story-based, usually. They really want to delve into your stories. They want to give you the floor to walk them through your stories, but they're going to ask a lot of questions to better understand what you did, how you felt, what your motivation was. It's usually pretty long. It can easily run 45 minutes to an hour, or even longer. And oftentimes it will feel more like a conversation. And that's the goal. They really just kind of want to know who you are truly. And you're typically paired with somebody who shares something in common with you, often a professional overlap. So if you're in private equity, it might be somebody who is in some sort of investing. If you're in technology, it might be a product manager at a tech firm. You can expect that for the most part, you will know ahead of time. You should definitely, I should have added that. I will when I get to the next, I'm just going to voice it over because it's a pretty good tip, actually. Definitely research the person on LinkedIn that you're interviewing with, because that will also help you figure out the questions that you have for them. But if someone's in a space that's near or like related to what you're doing, obviously, like it's going to help that you've checked out their LinkedIn. So the big secret here is you have to be ready to go deep into your stories. I'm not talking about the 2-minute version about the time that you implemented that new AI software that helped with cost reductions. I'm really talking about like getting inside your head, your strategic mindset, the choices you made, who you had to get on board, who was challenging to motivate or connect with, any other hiccups along the way, how you felt, how you reacted, how others reacted to you. So it's kind of like everything I said on HBS, but you've got to know the details a lot more and the specifics. And most of the questions are going to be designed to tease out when you have gone above and beyond. Stanford is looking for people who change lives, who change organizations, and who will change the world. Doing a good job at your job, that's like table stakes. They want to see people who are creating new avenues to go above and beyond and go even more. So a lot of their questions might be, tell me about a time that you took initiative. Tell me about a time when you spotted an opportunity nobody else did. Tell me about a time that you went beyond your job description. Notice that all those questions are kind of similar. They're all asking for when you went above and beyond. So that means you need to have a number of stories of where you went above and beyond. And that's super important. Also, I think a few of the starter questions, like the interview questions, to start the entire interview can be pretty challenging. What are you most proud of? We've had a number of clients report that being their first question. Or what are you most passionate about? Tough questions to think of an answer on the spot. Not so tough if you listen to this recording and you practice this ahead of time, right? It doesn't really matter what you're most proud of or what you're most passionate about. What does matter is that you're able to convey it in a way that feels authentic and real to you and connects with the interviewer, right? All right, let's talk about prep. All right, so the STAR format, which I've spelled out for you, especially with my second little R, STAR with that double R: situation, task, actions, results, and reflection. You need to know the STAR for multiple stories. I generally suggest knowing 8 to 10 stories that you know how the flow, you know the situation, the task, the actions you took, the 3 or 4 critical actions that you took, the results, and then how it shaped you. Why is it important to you? What you learned from it, what it reinforced to you. That second reflection. You should know 8 to 10 stories. And what you'll find is most of your stories can be used to answer several questions, right? So maybe I'm going to bring up the time that you led the implementation of an AI tool to help your clients deliver lower expenses or save costs. That might be something that when you had to go above and beyond, maybe it was your idea to come up with the AI to implement this specific AI technology in the first place. So maybe that was the time that you spotted an opportunity that others didn't. Maybe there was a conflict on the team, and that you're actually going to serve that up. This story could be used for a conflict question. What's important is that you've got a number. I use the expression Rolodex. I don't know how many more years I can use the expression of a Rolodex because most people do not any longer know what a Rolodex is. But I want you to have like that Rolodex in your mind of your stories that you can quickly flip through and serve up almost regardless of what the question is. That's critical for your GSB prep. And then again, they might not ask you why GSB. And sometimes I have clients be like, they didn't ask me, walk me through your resume, or why Stanford. That's fine. They just didn't want to. They got enough from you. But you should absolutely know the answers to why GSB, walk me through your resume, what your goals are, what you're going to contribute, all the basics. You may or may not be asked them. All right, guys, I'm going to keep going because my goodness, there's so much to get through here. So here are the questions, and I'll make some time for questions if people can stick around and have any more. For all interviews, each one of these and any other business school interview that you have, you should know the basics. I refer to the basics as walk me through your resume or tell me about yourself. Why business school? What are your goals? And why school X? And what you will contribute. You should know these absolutely for any school you are speaking with, okay? I'm going to point you in directions of some resources on the next slide so that you can practice these things. You should absolutely know these. Do your research on the school. This is imperative. It kind of goes without saying, but you are going to be asked to defend why this school in particular. You can't answer that if you have not done your research. Which leads me to my next point, my third point. Reread your application. Chances are you might have written an essay defending why Wharton, why Kellogg, why Tuck, why Columbia. You've already written these answers. Reread the essay you wrote so you are super prepared to answer why Wharton if you get that question. You've written an entire essay and like 2. That second essay is also pertinent to Wharton so that you're ready to answer those questions. Some people are like, I don't know if I can use what I wrote in my essay. I'm like, of course you can. You spent months perfecting it. Why would you not want to use it in an interview? Practice out loud and practice with others. You've already heard me say that. Have questions for them, even if you don't have a chance to ask them. This is essential. If we had more time, I'd confess to you how I did when I interviewed with MIT Sloan way back when. And the kind of like the thing I still makes me blush and embarrassment when I think about. We don't have enough time, so I'm not going to share it. But my guidance to you is have questions for if they ask, do you have any more questions or do you have any questions for me? because that's something I didn't do. Thank God I still got in. But this is a do as I say, not as I do situation. And then thank them. Either thank them in the moment, write it in like the PIR for HBS, follow up with a thank you note, common sense, but thank them and leave on a good note. Okay. All right, guys, I do want to open it up for questions. I just want to point out a few additional resources. We have some free resources that are pretty awesome. I'm biased, but I really do think they're awesome. And then we've got some paid resources that are equally awesome, but just they're paid. But we have tons of resources on our website, and a lot of our like one of our core pieces, our core resources is thanks to GMAT Club. So one thing on Harvard, Stanford, and Wharton, we have like we just scratched the surface today. We have some really specific guidance from our 2 former HBS interviewers on Gatehouse's team. They've written some materials that you can find on our website. We have workshops for both the Stanford interview and the Wharton interview. They're hosted by me, but I have a GSB alum, Alex Sultan, who's on the GSB one, who shares his experience, some of his tips for interviewing. He's also actually a former Arbuckle fellow at the GSB. He's awesome. So he's got some really valuable tips. And then the same with Wharton. We have a workshop that I hosted. Rachel Nelson, she's a Wharton grad. She, like me, has moderated a ton of Wharton TBDs. So there's great tips in there. And then I think it was 3 or 4 years ago, we did this entire workshop series on the application process with GMAT Club, and an entire hour workshop just on interviews and interview practice. It's on our website. It's the 9th part. I encourage you to check it out. And then we're going to run out of time. We have paid mock interview services specific to HBS, to GSB, Wharton, and all other schools. We love interview prep at Gatehouse. I think it's so much, it's not just about getting your stories across, it's being really strategic and thoughtful and doing it. And again, building that rapport with somebody that you don't know at all. It's really hard. So if you want a mock interview with us, they're pretty amazing, especially like our HBS mocks with Brooke and Laura, who are on the HBS admissions team for so long, or recreating that TBD experience. Definitely reach out to us. Okay, I'm going to take a big glass of water, but not before suggesting next steps. Follow us on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok. I'm doing lots of videos now. Definitely would love comments, some likes, make me feel like I'm not always just talking to a camera. That's always good. So follow us. But also, like this month, I'm doing tons of tips on interview, and I know GMAT Club is too. They're another great resource. But reach out for a free consultation. I've been talking to you. Now's your chance to talk to me or someone else on the team about your specifics. I see a lot of questions about like GSB and deferred applicants. Schedule some time with us so that we can go into your specific questions. And definitely for a mock interview, definitely book one sooner rather than later. We book up quickly because we're in high demand, and it's all like if we could do interviews any time of year, we could, but it happens that this is the time to do them. And then just check out all the resources I mentioned on gatehouse.com, gatehouseadmissions.com. All right, I'm going to pause. Any other questions, guys? I see some questions specifically around deferral and Big Mike applying to Stanford. The rest of the schools I'm applying to are Booth, Kellogg, Michigan, Ross, Yale, SOM. All of the interview prep we talked about is applicable for those schools, especially the general prep. Say good luck and fingers crossed for you. And then what parameters do they look for in candidate in Stanford GSB? Is there a specific type of personality? Nope. No specific personality. There'll be extroverts, introverts. This is about Stanford, what they're looking for. There are all types of managers and leaders out there. That is what they're trying to replicate in the classroom. I think there's this misconception. Everybody's got to be an entrepreneur at Stanford. I know plenty of non-entrepreneurs at Stanford. I also know entrepreneurs at Stanford. It's important to be you, focus on your goals, who you are. That's who Stanford wants in the classroom. That's like the most essential part. Like you can't fit your way into something of what you think Stanford wants. You're always going to put yourself into a box that just doesn't fit right. Be who you are and and be that with pride and confidence, and let the cards fall where they can. Obviously, work with us. We can help you tell your story better, but it's always your story that you need to be telling. All right. Why is GMAT the standard? Is it truly applicable to finding the best candidates? GB. It's a great question. So there is been data. They have run analysis to show that the GMAT success on the GMAT correlates with success in someone's first year of the program. So the school, it is never just about the GMAT, but the GMAT is essential because of the rigor of the program, the focus on quant skills and the analytics that is required of business-oriented leaders. The GMAT is a predictive tool that the schools don't want to fail you just as much as you don't want to fail. And the GMAT does become a tool for determining whether or not someone is ready for the program. The GRE likewise, that's why they use it, but it is just one factor. So, you do have to give your all to the GMAT. I do encourage you to look at the averages. I always encourage being honest with yourself. I'll get people who have a very low GMAT who look at a very high average and say, why not me? And I'll say, because the school just doesn't have to accept you. Like, the averages are important to them. But that said, at the same time, you can still go for it, and go for it with your all, but don't mislead yourself too, because the GMAT, right or wrong, is still pretty important. All right. And then I want to make sure, I hope that helps. Nate, 30 minutes before. And if I need to go at any point, GMAT Club, just let me know and I'll wrap, but otherwise I'll spend just a few more minutes. 30 minutes before the interview, what would you say are the most important things to review from your prep before going to the interview? Nate, that's a great question. I think it's always about the basics. Like, remind yourself why school X, because I say school X, and maybe you have back-to-back interviews with this school and that school. So you might accidentally mention Kellogg's Consulting Club when you're talking to Ross. That's not going to necessarily sink you, but I would reread your application on your goals for the specific school before you're heading in. I would look at your resume and practice in your mind the walk me through your resume. I would practice my goals in my mind to make sure I know them. And I would also be ready to answer what I will contribute. That's the immediate prep I would do. And if you do that prep, I think it's also just you're kind of on your game for any other question, but those are the most essential ones that I would encourage you to prepare well before, but then even then in that 30 minutes ahead. And then take a deep breath. Remember, this is not a test. Remember, you're trying to build that rapport. You're not just trying to get out your answer as fast as possible so they can be impressed with you and give you an acceptance. You're trying to build a relationship. All right. I think one more, Anurag, and then we will wrap. Thanks a lot. Just one more question. How much weight is given to different parts for Stanford, especially for deferred applicants? There's no specific weight. It's the whole package. They do want people who are extraordinarily smart, who have done extraordinary things. The one thing I will say with deferred applicants is the whole premise is Stanford is kind of like buying you off the market 2 or 3 years early. So you have to be pretty awesome along all dimensions. Otherwise, they can say, we really like this guy, but we might see him in 3 years. Let's just hold off. And actually, that's a common outcome. They just want people who are really magnificent across just about every dimension. That's the easiest way to say what they're looking for, the deferrals. They're looking for superstars and enough evidence of superstardom to pull you off the market early. All right, you guys. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, GMAT Club. As always, I always love talking to the GMAT Club community. So thank you. I'm going to wrap now. But if you do have additional questions, you can see where to reach out to us, sign up for a free consultation, and welcome, check out our resources too. We love interview prep. We love working with business school applicants. And most importantly to all of you, good luck on the journey ahead. I'll be rooting for you. So that's it. Take care. Bye-bye.